in this house.
Hello and welcome back to Dark Static, a podcast where we catalog and discuss everything found footage and analog horror. I'm your host, Alex Schiffer. With me always is Zach.
Hi, it's me.
It's you, and you're not, there's no terrifying presence here. We're all safe.
We're all safe. Speak for yourself.
Tonight's episode is going to be a pretty big one, and I think the last time we were doing this show, I kind of teased that the next episode was going to be the Blair Witch Project. We're actually going forward in time a lot to this month. Actually, I forgot if this movie came out this month or last month. I think it was last. Yeah, this is definitely last month.
I think it was actually technically last month.
Well, it hits streaming this month. That film we're talking about is Skinamarink, the latest kind of viral horror sensation from director Kyle Edward Ball. I am so pumped to talk about this movie. We've been mostly dealing with the early found footage films. We've been talking about, the McPherson tape, last broadcast. We talked about Cannibal Holocaust. We've been kind of in this 90s vintage horror. Might be strange for some listeners for me to be calling 90s vintage, I guess. But that's what it is. We're in 2023 now, and we're talking about a 2023 movie finally. I know there have been, other found footage and analog horror media that's come out, in the past year in 2022. I know movies like, VHS, the new VHS 99. Was it 99 or 94? VHS 94 came out the year before.
99, I think, was the recent one.
Yeah, VHS 99 was the latest one. That came out last year, and then Deadstream was a big one last year. I decided what perfect timing this was that a movie like Skinamarink has come out, because we've talked about the films that have used the found footage technique in horror, and now we're going to the other thing that this podcast is going to touch on, which is analog horror. And if you've never heard that term before, I think it's got more than one meaning, but basically it can mean, like liminal horror or lo-fi horror, usually dealing with nostalgic subject matter, nostalgic imagery. Usually analog deals with the past, because we're all, and anything that doesn't include digital technology basically is considered analog horror. And you'll find a lot of analog horror mainly online. It's mostly lived on like YouTube ARGs for the longest time. And this new film, Skinamarink, has now kind of brought it into, I don't think this is a mainstream film, in any way, but it was definitely,
No.
I think you've definitely seen it talked about, at least, because, this movie hit theaters with a pretty limited release, and I was actually very lucky to have gotten to see Skinamarink in the theater. I saw it at the IFC Center in Manhattan, fucking one of my favorite theaters to go see anything.
I'm so jealous.
That was an incredible experience.
I wish I had seen this in the theater.
Yeah. And it's funny because like this doesn't really seem like a movie. Like you hear about Skinamarink and maybe it comes up on your For You page on TikTok, which I think is where a lot of people got to know the name and first saw the trailer maybe on TikTok. What everyone I have heard before I saw it had said about it was, oh yeah, watch this movie, late at night, all the lights off, watch it on like your laptop with headphones and shit like that. And I do see that, but this is going to sound corny as shit. The movie theater is a magical place and can make a lot of magical things happen.
All Heartbreak feels good in a place like.
Yeah. You know the funny thing? To this day, I've never seen that ad.
What?
I've never seen. I don't go to AMC's. I don't go to AMC theaters.
You haven't been to an AMC once.
I have not been to an AMC once where that Nicole Kidman ad is played. I know the meme. I know the meme. I've never experienced it.
Dude, God save the Queen! Holy shit, that's insane. That's absolutely insane.
I think I vowed never to go to an AMC ever again after something was ruined for me. Well, my main issue with the AMC is that their sound systems are kind of crap, and you always tend to hear if you're going there to see like a quiet movie, be like a drama, something not as bombastic.
A Marvel movie.
Well, usually it's a Marvel movie that will leak its sound into your theater. You just hear the resonance of that film coming from next door, and it's leaking into like your screening of Little Women or something. I think that's the movie I was watching that ruined AMC's for me. Getting back on subject, I just wanted to ask, what is your like experience with analog horror, if any? It might be a completely new concept to you. I'm not really sure. Have you ever experienced anything or watched a series online about analog horror or, any web series at all?
No, I was like never really into that stuff. I had a few friends, like a roommate in early college and stuff like that, where they were like very into that scene. I think like Marble Hornets is one of the big ones.
Yeah.
I mean, I know like actual feature films have taken influence from like these analog methods in order to create what is essentially analog horror. Like you've got like Blair Witch Project, and then a little bit of like that stuff is in like Videodrome and The Ring and stuff, where you like look at these like
particularly
terrible footage.
Particularly the Japanese Ring. I feel like is when I watch that, it's more synonymous with what I think of as analog horror than the Naomi Watts one. Both great movies, but I think if you watch the Japanese one, it's kind of a little bit more apparent what we're talking about.
Yeah, like there's just like an authenticity to it where you feel like you're watching like something that is like snuff film adjacent, or like this avant-garde film, what you're not supposed to be watching, and that can only kind of come from the thing actually looking like something real.
Totally, yeah. I think for me, I don't think I discovered it late. I guess analog horror was a thing for longer, but I remember watching stuff like, of course, Marble Hornets is the big one. I followed that for a long time. And Marble Hornets, and by the way, we will do a whole episode on Marble Hornets. Just you wait. We will cover Marble Hornets. It's funny because Marble Hornets, it is analog horror, but it also just uses those found footage techniques that we've become used to, that have been introduced in the 90s, and it seems a bit more familiar. But the ones that are out today are very, very out there. I don't know if you've ever watched anything from like the Mandela catalog, or have you heard of Ben Drowned?
Oh, I have heard of this movie. It's not really a series. Movie. Yeah, I haven't.
Well, it's kind of just a video, but I remember Ben Drowned fucking freaks the shit out of me still. I would associate that with analog horror because it does deal with like a past childhood nostalgic thing being twisted. I think we'll also do an episode on Ben Drowned as well. But it has to do with like something from your childhood being twisted, which and that's echoed in Skinamarink, I think masterfully. But before we get more into Skinamarink, I kind of want to get into the director a little bit, Kyle Edward Ball. This is his debut theatrical release, and he is a filmmaker, primarily, lived on YouTube for a while, and he has a channel called Bite-Sized Horrors. where basically I think he goes on Reddit and he asks people to send him their nightmares, and what he does is he visualizes it in a horrifying way, kind of reminiscent of the style you're seeing in a movie like Skinamarink. Yeah, it's called Bite-Sized Nightmares. I think I said Bite-Sized Horror. Yeah, Bite-Sized Nightmares. And basically he has been making these for a long time, and he's not really that big of a YouTuber, I would say. Bite-Sized Nightmares only has like 27 million. 27 million. That's so much. 27. He only has like
billion kajillion.
27,000 subscribers. Not too big. Still pretty sizable. But what also lives on here is a movie called Heck, which I would describe as a kind of like a proof of concept for Skinamarink. I don't know if you watched that one. I watched Heck before I watched Skinamarink in the theater. Actually, before I watched Skinamarink, I watched a ton of these little videos, and I kind of got a good sense of what his style, his filmmaking style was. And the thing about Skinamarink is that it is an evolution of what he's tested here, and it's surprisingly way more abstract than what he's presented in these YouTube videos, where it's usually like the other way around. Like you kind of experiment on YouTube, and then when you get to your first debut feature that is screened, in festivals and in theaters across the country, that's usually your more, I don't want to say marketable, but like usually your more easy to digest picture, using all of the things that you've learned from making your more experimental stuff. I think Kyle Edward Ball does the opposite here. I think after watching all these, I think he's found his voice with these shorts, and really decided to just go all out with his debut feature. Now, Skinamarink premiered in 2022. It is considered a 2022 movie. It played in 2022 at festivals, but had its limited release recently in like January 2023. That's when it was officially released. And funnily enough, during its screening, the film was actually leaked online. And that's where I first heard about this whole thing. And that's when people started to really talk about it, because they watched it illegally. And illegally. And that's when TikTokers got a hold of it, like, oh, guys, you got to watch this new horror movie. It's one of the scariest things ever made, Skinamarink. And it made the rounds, I'll say, on TikTok, which made me feel a little apprehensive about the whole thing. Now, I'm not saying that this was by design. In fact, I think it's a known fact that this wasn't by design. But when I heard about all this, I was kind of dubious about that fact, that it was leaked. And I was like, this sounds like it was planned to make this movie go viral.
It's like nothing leaks anymore.
Yeah. But after learning more about this film and its budget especially, I kind of believe it. Because this movie was made for $15,000.
Yeah, it's nothing.
And which is absolutely nothing. And impressively grossed like $2 million, I think, or near $2 million, which is a pretty big success, I'll say.
That is, huge.
Yeah, so it's made a profit, and which I was excited about, because a movie like this usually doesn't screen, and it's kind of becomes harder and harder to get a hold of. But thankfully we got Shudder, and Shudder is the bomb. It is the best streaming service, and they picked up Skinamarink, and now you can go watch it. Mm-hmm. You can go watch Skinamarink on Shudder, and while you're at it, watch everything else on Shudder, because it's the goddamn best. But watch Skinamarink first.
It's so good.
Watch Skinamarink first, and then listen to this podcast, because we're going to be spoiling the shit out of it. It's even funny to say spoil for this film because I don't really know how to spoil this film, to be quite honest.
So you can actually say,
yeah, like what am I gonna say? What am I gonna say that'll spoil? Like at the end, fucking like no. This movie is more of a sensory experience than it is a plot delivery experience. Yeah, no, it's a hard movie to spoil. It's like trying to spoil Eraserhead or something. Like, what am I exactly gonna tell you that'll ruin the experience? Like nothing. You just have to watch it. And it's funny. I would actually, liken a movie like Eraserhead to something to Skinamarink, but
like this movie is like when you imagine like somebody taking you to a museum or making you sit down for like a student film. Although I don't want to insult this and say it's like the quality of this movie is higher than that. But this is you're imagining the same thing. Like that's what this is.
I think what you mean is
it is
as soon as not like a student film, but like a DIY project.
This isn't Paranormal Activity. This is not like you're going to get a coherent plot that with like concrete characters. Like most of it is just like imagery. It's just showing you shots of a house, like different parts of the house. It is a collection. That's what the majority of the movie is.
Oh yeah, it's a collection of compositions, and it is all meant to get across a specific feeling, and we'll get to what this movie invokes in you when we get to our thoughts. Mm-hmm. The only other background I'd say about this film, about Kyle Edward Ball, is that this movie was shot in his childhood home, which makes the film feel very connected to the space. And the way that this movie explores that space, I feel like is done so much more effectively because this is the director's childhood home.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I did not know that until you said that, but that makes a lot of sense because it really is mining a lot of like these intimate corners of a place that if you were just having to like seek out those areas yourself, you might not notice them as easily. If you grew up there your entire life and you knew, oh my God, I used to sit in the living room and when the lights were out and then the TV was on, this one corner behind, the kitchen table or whatever was like always freaked me out. Like, immediately how you're going to set up your shot.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, this is going to really...
where all the naturally eerie places are.
Absolutely. I feel like I can do that in every place that I've lived in. I can point to places that have freaked me the fuck out, including where I live now. You've been to my apartment. The hallway that is
oh my gosh,
has my bathroom and the kitchen.
Your hallway is this movie.
That hallway is right out of this movie. I feel like a lot of
I just want to throw out there for context, in your apartment complex, the doors don't have numbers on them. Like they don't have. There are a lot of doors that really feel like if you open them, there would just be a wall behind them.
Some doors don't have.
Very abstract.
There are some doors in my apartment building that don't have handles, that don't have knobs, and it's more of a. This is something to really get on. If you're a fan of liminal spaces, then I think that this movie's worth giving a look-see.
This is the movie for you.
I know, because that's a big thing right now. And I actually kind of disagree with some of that. I imagine liminal spaces as being a lot more empty than what's being presented here, because in this movie there's a lot of clutter, and it seems to be a lot more rinky-dink. That's Skinamarink-dink as unlike what I imagine liminal spaces to be like. But I've seen so many people describe it as liminal horror. So I guess there's something there. But by the way,
I can maybe speak to why people think that is, just like briefly. I'm not really up on the whole liminal space happening. Like, I'm sure on TikTok, and for context,
you haven't read the Backrooms lore?
No, I have not. I don't know where I have not found that. Most of my experience with that kind of stuff, in true Backrooms fashion, the lore finds you. No, I mean, I'm mostly like scrolling TikTok or something like that, and then I liked the right videos, so the algorithm shows me like someone's 3D animation of some freaky series of hallways, impossible hallways or whatever.
Yeah, you've carefully crafted your TikTok algorithm.
Are familiar with that? Yeah, by complete accident clued TikTok into the kind of fucked up shit that I'm into, I guess. I guess for me, experience with like the analog horror of the internet and the liminal space stuff, what this movie taps into, I think, is like where that same stuff comes from, which is the experience of like being an easily confused child, and then you wake up in like your friend's house, or you went out of state to visit your distant cousins or something, and you wake up in a house or a place that is unfamiliar to you.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is like
probably went out to dinner or something.
Yeah. I think that I feel as if though like the real horror, I mean we'll get to it when we finally get to like our impressions, but I feel like the real horror isn't like not in unfamiliar spaces, but like spaces that you are usually find as comforting, but are twisted, and that's the more disturbing nature of it.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're gonna get into our overall thoughts and feelings, because admittedly, like, this is not going to be a movie for everybody, and it's got some it has a pretty divided critical reception, I would say, and divided in a finally, I think we have a movie that is divided audiences in an actual good way, where one side is like, hey, this movie is great, and then the other side is like, hey, I respect the shit out of this, but man, this wasn't for me. I feel like that's the two sides, and I accept that as a discourse, and not what we usually see out of our so-called controversial media nowadays.
Like actual discussion.
Yeah, actual discussion, or not even. One side wants to engage with it, and the other side, engaged with it and decided, it's not for them.
Yeah, and nobody's sending each other's, putting each other's addresses on.
Yeah, there's no
the internet. There's no as a form of discourse.
Yeah, there's no culture war surrounding Skinamarink. Thank God. Before we get into the film proper, I want to kind of introduce like what is this movie actually about. I'm going to read the plot synopsis provided by Letterboxd. And actually, the one on Shudder is a little bit longer, but I feel like the shorter version just gives you just enough. The one on Shudder is like goes into a little bit not spoiler territory, but like maybe tells you a bit too much. Depending on who you are, might tell you a bit too much. So I'm just going to read the one provided by Letterboxd, which. Speaking of Letterboxd, you can follow me on Letterboxd at Schiffer Audio. I log things pretty consistently on there. Zach, do you have a Letterboxd?
I don't have a Letterboxd, but I do have a Mubi. M-U-B-I. Mubi.
Where can they follow you on Mubi? You follow people on Mubi?
I think my account is that's just my name, Zach Gilbert Mahoney. Yeah, you can follow people on Mubi. You can see my list if you want. I track like every single movie and TV show that I've seen. I also have a separate list of just like my absolute favorites out of the like over 1,000 movies I've seen. I managed to whittle it down to like 180.
God damn.
So far. and I'm just gonna keep adding to those as I go.
Yeah, I would never
So
do
you
that.
you can check it out there.
I would never do that.
I don't review everything. That's why I'm not on Letterboxd. I just like chronicle that I have it. I have seen it, but I don't write anything about it because that would be my entire life.
Yeah, if you follow me on Letterboxd, I don't like give full reviews. I just do like little jokes.
It's a bit machine, basically.
It's a bit machine for me.
It's the new Twitter.
It's the yeah. Thank God. If we lose Twitter, at least we got Letterboxd. Anyway, I'm going to read the plot synopsis from Letterboxd. Two children wake up in the middle of the night to find their father is missing, and all the windows and doors in their home have vanished. Doesn't that sell you immediately?
Honestly, it kind of does for me.
Yeah, that's all you need to know. This movie stars Lucas Paul, plays a 4-year-old kid named Kevin, and then Kaylee is played by Dolly Rose Tetrault. I may have butchered that name. Ross Paul plays the dad, and Jamie Hill is the mother. I didn't know that the mother was credited, mostly because I think the mother's involvement in the story is actually like what I consider an actual spoiler for this film. One of the few ones that I would say. The synopsis just reads, their father is missing. Nothing is said about that there is a mother in the picture. And I think that plays an integral role in the film. But anyway, let's get into our overall thoughts on Skinamarink. Zach, why don't you go ahead?
Overall thoughts. So I know this movie is very polarizing. I think I fall closer to the camp of people who are fans of this movie. I was not ecstatic about it like a lot of people have been. But overall, I think I really enjoyed it. I really admire what it's doing. I got something out of it. I think it was very effective at the thing that a movie like this, I think, is like super subjective. All horror is subjective, but this especially, like
all film,
all film,
art.
Definitely
all art.
But horror has this thing where it's like if you're not afraid of like open water, like Jaws is going to have no issue absolutely ruining you. Mm-hmm. Whereas other people might just shrug and go, I didn't get the big deal. And that just comes down to personal experience. That this is just a movie where it's so specific what it's about, its style, the way it's shot, the way it sounds, the colors, the use of darkness. Like if you are not, this movie washes over you and it's a vibe. If you're not hanging with that vibe, then it's just not going to work.
Totally agree with that.
So it's a movie that I can watch and enjoy as a filmmaker and watch and enjoy as an experience, but I wasn't scared of it the same way that I think a lot of people are.
Okay, Mr. Big Boy.
Absolutely terrified of.
Mr. Big
And
Pants.
maybe part of that is that I watched this movie at home because it was in such limited release. It was really, really difficult to get access to a theater that was playing it. Like Alex, I know you saw it in a theater, as you just said. And I think it's a way different experience seeing this movie in just a giant pitch black room, and you're not able to look at your cell phone. You're not able to be distracted by sunlight coming in through your window or the sounds of people outside or whatever. Mm-hmm. I tried to control my viewing experience as much as possible, but for whatever reason, aside from like not jump scare moments, but standout moments, I wasn't on the edge of my seat, terrified. I don't know. It just didn't hit me in that same way. But I still, like I said, I still really like the movie. There's just other movies that I would say this is not. Some people have called this the scariest movie they've ever seen. For me, it's not even like.
Zach.
Yes, Alex.
This is the scariest movie I've ever seen. This is one of the scariest fucking movies I've ever seen.
I want to hear, because this is so interesting to me, because it's all about perspective. I want to get into the mind of somebody who is like, what's going through your mind while you're watching this? Like, what is it that
Why do you think
scares
those things?
you?
Why do you think those wrong opinions?
Why are you wrong?
Why are you fucking wrong, dude? Not only is this one of the scariest movies I've ever fucking seen in my life, I genuinely think this movie's a fucking masterpiece of horror. And when I watched this movie, I had a vision, Zach. I stared straight into the future of horror filmmaking. This right here, Skinamarink, this is the fucking future to me.
This is the future.
To me, this is the fucking future. You're kind of going back to what you're saying about it's all about perspective. I think a lot of art that you consume is totally circumstantial. Totally circumstantial, the mood you're in at the time, just where you are in your life at the time. Different art will mean something to you. For right now, where I'm at, something like Skinamarink just smacked me over the head and is constantly, in fact, lingering with me and trying to murder me at every corner. I have not stopped thinking about this film since I saw it. I saw this movie back in January. I think like late January. I've never gotten these images out of my head. I think this movie was set up perfectly for me. That's why I'm saying like the art you consume is very circumstantial. The space I was in during this film was perfect. When the lights go down in the IFC Center, it's like pitch black almost. There are no lights when the movie starts playing. It is such a great environment to watch horror movies. So already that's amazing. Before that, the movie was introduced to us by a writer. I think she worked for, I think The Guardian, something like that. She worked for some media outlet. And she introduced the film. And at first, I will say, and no offense to her, but like, I didn't know if she did a great job introducing the film, because this movie, tells you so little up front that I understood that it was like hard to explain. But after watching the film, she actually set it up perfectly. And one thing that she said that really stuck with me was that in order to really engage with this film in the fullest sense, is you need to study every nook and cranny of each frame that you see, and you will, in a way, create this sort of ritual with the film. After you become a part of that ritual, this movie is then out to get you in a very visceral way. I was scared fucking shitless watching this movie, Zach. This movie started, and I was doing what she said. I immediately found it interesting just because of the aesthetic alone. And my God, just as a sound designer, I think this movie is almost downright inspirational. Kind of like the feelings that were evoked in me after I saw a movie like Eraserhead. And funnily enough, like Eraserhead, this movie's also been directed and sound designed by the director. And he uses a lot of techniques that aren't really that far out of the way from what I do normally in my work. But just being able to hear all that presented to me from the screen, from the speakers to my ears, made me feel a way I've never felt watching a film before. I've never seen anything like this. Believe me when I say that after, this movie settles in and the true dread starts to creep its way up you, there is nothing scarier to me. I was literally sweating at one point. My chest started to feel like a little bit like pressure. I started to feel my chest like tightening. I felt small, literally felt small. At one point during this film, and we'll get to the specifics of what, this film is showing you. And I'll tell you exactly when things really started to go wrong. I swear at certain points in this film, I could not look at the fucking screen. This is one of the few films where I didn't cover my eyes completely. I hovered my hand over my eyes. I hovered them over my hand over my like forehead and like tried to cover I was in position to cover my eyes because I could not bear to. I went from studying every little nook and cranny of the frame to not being able to even stare at the screen. And there's like panic in my voice right now, just trying to remember what I experienced. And it sounds like, oh my God, this must have been a fucking miserable nightmare. And it's like, yeah, it was. And that's why it was fucking incredible to me. Because this is a film that made me, a film that fucking really put me in its space and really made me feel trapped by it. I was locked in that seat in the theater. I sat pretty close to the screen, by the way, which maybe also enhanced my experience. It's kind of hard to get. I will say it's kind of hard to get good seats in the IFC Center, depending on what theater you're in. You have to show up pretty early, I'd say. For some reason, we decided to sit pretty far up front, maybe like third row, I think. I think that added a lot.
Yeah, I just think looking up at this, house of worship style.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like right up at this,
I groveled at the feet of Skinamarink. It's gonna sound.
I repented.
I felt like I needed to repent after this film for nothing. I don't know what. I don't know. I'm not guilty of anything. I feel like I did something wrong because this movie was trying to fucking get me for some reason. It really did feel like the boogeyman was like trying to get me watching this fucking movie. I swear to God.
That's why I respect it, because I can tell that magic is there.
It is. This is why I said the movie theater is magic. And I did watch this again. All I could remember was when I watched this in the theater and how fucking out of my mind I felt by being scared by this. And it still works. Like I'm looking at a shot right now, and it's the most terrifying thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And it's literally a hallway. It's just a hallway. One more thing is, I think people are saying, which is a kind of a sentiment that I sort of agree with, but not for the reason you think, is that this movie is surprisingly long. It's an hour 40, which, for a film like this, you'd never expect it to go on that long. But here's my case for it. I think at some point, I thought this movie was going to end in like 7 different places. And that's because I was not doing well. And I was in a place where I was desperate for this movie to just fucking end. Not because I was bored or it was going on too long, or, anything that would, basically require the feeling of like, oh my God, this movie should just fucking end already. Like, I don't want to sit here and watch this anymore. In Skinamarink, while I was watching it, I was like, oh my God, please end. I don't want to be trapped here anymore. And this movie just keeps going. It keeps making you feel like you are this complete and utter child. And it has all the control over you. You don't get to say when this movie ends. It'll end when it wants to. Not only do I think that this movie actually goes further, I don't think this movie ends, as soon as it says the end. The movie does say the end as its title card, which I find kind of funny. But the things that it leaves with you afterward the horror of Skinamarink doesn't end. It never ends. It never leaves you. And I think it does that fabulously when we start to really talk about its overall, thematic importance, and what it's really touching at. That's the kind of shit that you leave a theater and never stop thinking about that forever. And there are not a lot of films I can say that have made me feel that strongly. I've seen a lot of fucking amazing films, but I feel very, very close to this movie in particular.
That was such like a heap of praise, and like I know it's like, again, like with horror, I've been the guy who's been like, oh my god, this is like the scariest scene of the year. This is one of the scariest things I've ever seen. And my partner, or whoever, has just been like, I don't really get it. I mean, I like the movie, but I don't really see why you thought that was that scary. So I don't want to like. No,
you're not invalidating. I don't
want to rain on anybody's parade.
Yeah, I listen. I don't need to be validated.
Especially because I liked the movie. I really liked it. So I don't. I mean, I think I'll just say, like, you said that this film is the future of horror, and I agree, but not in the literal sense. Not in the way that. I don't think it's because I think all movies are going to look like this. Or people are going to like
not every
rip off Skinamarink style.
Exactly. No, I don't think every film, don't get me wrong, I don't think every film in the future should be an avant-garde horror experiment, I think movies like this are special and come along every once in a while, and that's fine. Although, honestly, when we talk about it's just very recently we've had two, because we're also going to talk about The Outwaters very soon.
Yeah. And I have a feeling that movie is going to scare,
but
just based off of like the little bit of footage I've seen.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, I think that it follows a similar, like, DIY filmmaker gets to do what he wants for the length of a feature film, and that kind of speaks to me. And we've had two now in the last 2 months of this year, 2023. That have showed us, I feel like, what the future of horror is going to look like. For the past 10 years, I'd say we've gone through the, I fucking hate this word so much, the elevated horror phase, which is also kind of not true. Like, but the films that really make, the horror films that really make a landing are the ones, that are highly artistic, and not to say that other horror movies aren't artistic. There's art to virtually, all horror.
Exactly. That's so dumb. It's like, there's bad and good versions of everything.
Yeah, but the elevated horror craze, like the A24, horror films that come out, ones made by like Ari Aster and Robert Eggers, and those films that have really made a landing and really resonated with a lot of people over the years, and that's become their idea of what horror should look like. Even though there's so much, and those movies are great. I love all those movies. And there's so much horror history to really consume, and to really inform you about what horror should look like. But when I saw Skinamarink, I feel like I saw a window into the future. And it's really the first time, because the thing that shocked me about it was, oh my God, this was like really the first time that I'm seeing one of these analog horror YouTube videos on the big screen. And it worked so effectively that I was like, this should be not everyone. Like, this shouldn't, I don't want movies like this all the time, but I want movies to be inspired by this that maybe have more traditional narratives, or, I want someone to, I want a DIY filmmaker to take direct inspiration from this movie and make their own shit and it to blow up. That's what I feel like this movie is going to invoke with a lot of people.
it's awesome for what it represents, like for like from an indie perspective, but then also, again, this fits very well with your opinion about elevated horror. This movie, we're covering it on a found footage podcast, but technically, it's not found footage.
No, it's not found footage.
This is not a movie where somebody.
It doesn't use the found footage technique, but analog horror is a huge part of it. And also, I feel like I feel like this is also what this movie feels like is it feels like, and it sounds stupid, it feels like the start of a creepypasta. Like say you're reading a creepypasta and it starts like my friend sent me this videotape and it was this movie. It was Skinamarink. My friend sent me this movie called Skinamarink, and it was all this collection. You're like reading about the description of all the images that he saw, and that's the creepypasta. That would be the found footage, but Skinamarink is in itself like the footage that someone might find to force them to write about it and on the internet, in like a creepypasta.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say that, like, to Skinamarink's, like, something favorable that Skinamarink has done is taken found like stylings and like some of the feel of like the analog stuff from found footage. Yeah. But because it's not actually found footage, it doesn't have to deal with any of the restrictions of found footage where it's like, exactly. We have to explain this, so we can't get this shot because you wouldn't.
Yeah, they never have to explain a camera. It just is.
And they can have lights be in the house that are coming from nowhere. Like there's no reason a pink light should.
Well, pretty much this entire movie is lit by
but not literally. But that's almost impossible because it's like sometimes the TV the light is coming from positions that like there shouldn't be a light coming from, if that makes sense. Like some of the shots, it's just like where is this pink light coming from? Where is this orange light coming from? That's like strong enough to. It's somehow getting the living room, but also down the hallway and also upstairs. And because they can just jump around because there's not actually a camera.
Yeah,
I think
they make it a point like he has
of analog horror.
Mm-hmm. I think they do make it a point that he has a flashlight at one point. That one of the kids does have a flashlight.
Okay, well, I just mean to say the movie is free to be more abstract with
totally
where what it wants to show you to be naturalistic.
Mm-hmm.
It can be surreal. Like Eraserhead. Like, it can be weird. It's weirder. Whereas these other movies always have to be like, well, we can show you a ghost. We can show you, a pair of keys moving across a table.
Yeah.
We can show you, a cabinet falling over. We can show you a spooky ghost. Every movie is it's a fucking spooky ghost every single time.
Yeah.
And eventually that gets so normalized that it's not scary anymore.
Well,
this movie doesn't have to do that shit because I don't think this is a ghost movie.
Is this a spooky ghost movie? Maybe. I mean, we will get into our interpretations of what the story of the film actually is.
I think they're dealing with something worse than a ghost. I don't know what it is, but like
a ghost, a demon.
But that's that restrict. They're able to do things like all the windows and the walls are gone, and they show you like a weird flash with a weird warbly sound effect of like the door in the window phasing in and out of existence. And
did you like those effects?
A certain level of realism. I did for what the movie was. Like because the movie was weird. It was an experimental film. So
I've heard people say that it was like kind of goofy.
But sometimes goofy is, I don't know what that is about horror, but sometimes goofiness makes it worse. It actually kind of makes it scarier sometimes. That was what I found. I found that true of like Nope last year too. Like,
what scene in Nope?
There's just elements to it that are kind of like lighthearted or goofy, and it makes. I mean, they're dealing with like there's a floating sand dollar in the sky that makes weird, has certain noises coming out of it, and
so good.
There's just a surrealness to it it's one of those things where it's like, hey, if this is scary to you, it's really scary. If it's not, it's not. Scary is just something kind of very bluntly horrifying. But I actually think like sometimes contrast of like goofiness and humor, the stuff that like David Lynch does a lot, is sometimes like freakier for some reason. I don't know what that is, like what that sensation is. I don't know. It just like sticks with you.
No, yeah, I
comedy,
totally get
like
that.
dark comedy and movies are like stay with me in a way that.
Yeah, no, there is, and it's funny. Like you mentioned, like the comedy of it, because like I think there is one single moment of levity in this entire film, and that's the toilet thing. When the toilet disappears and they grab buckets. And they're like gross. That's I thought that was really, I thought that was kind of not charming, but like one of the few moments of levity in this film, and you needed one
like the whole
this
movie,
film is so goddamn dark.
This movie is about fucking kids in like being pursued by something.
Yeah, well let's talk about
real ass kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're actually like 4 years old, I think. Which really is, when you hear about that, this film becomes way more upsetting. Let's kind of get into our thoughts on the, what semblance of a plot that there is. And I actually think after watching it again, there's a lot more of a plot than I had initially suspected, because I think I was so overcome with fear the first time watching it. I was like, this movie is about something. That didn't matter to me the first time I watched it. The second time I watched it, I was like, okay, there's like, I was really trying to like get the story, and I feel like I did get it. And I have my own theory as to what's going on here, but let's kind of get into the events of the film and what happens in the film. Again, if you haven't watched Skinamarink, I don't know. Don't listen to this. I don't know. Don't listen to this podcast if you haven't watched the film, prior to it. Cause I'm not good at giving spoiler warnings. I just kind of talk about the film, but yeah, we're going to get into the, major events of this film. This film kind of starts and immediately sets the tone with, its structure. You immediately get the sense that you are in the POV of the children. I think at all times, the camera is only like a few feet off the ground, which makes things seem really, really big. And the first like shot that you really get is the shot of a brightly lit room, probably the brightest thing, most clearly lit thing you'll see in this entire film is this kind of like a playroom, and then a dark hallway. And I feel like that kind of sets up what the aesthetic is going to feel like at all times. And I'm immediately getting the sense like the doorway that you see in the first shot gives you this sense that, everything is going to be to this scale, because everything looks ginormous in this film. Because when you're a child, like everyday things look really, really big. And I think the film, does a consistently good job communicating that. But really, the inciting incident of this film is the little boy, Kevin, is staring up this doorway, and you kind of get the sense that he's looking at something, but you don't know what. It's also one of the few scenes that you see a full body of someone. Most of this film, you don't really see a lot of, you don't see any faces at all, except for maybe the end.
You see somebody who's missing a face.
You see someone's missing a face. We'll get to that. Holy Jesus fucking Christ. But this is the first, you see this boy, you see Kevin, and he's looking up at this doorway. You kind of hear him talking to it, or talking to it. You don't really know what it is, but you hear him talking, and he basically falls down the stairs. Now, you don't know if something like told him to do it. I don't think, but he falls down the stairs, and things go dark for a bit, and you hear the father on the phone. Basically the point of view is like you're still downstairs and you're hearing the father upstairs, which I think is actually a really bit of a good moment of sound design. And a note on the sound design here is that all of the dialogue actually in this film completely ADR'd. It's all ADR'd in the house. It's not done in like a studio or anything. They recorded all of the sound, all of the dialogue separately in the house.
So just so that they could get the actual like the correct air, the correct.
Yeah, so it sounds like they're coming from this. It sounds like the dialogue is coming from the same room, and films rarely get the opportunity to do that. I think to record the dialogue on set. I think I read in an interview that this film was done entirely with MOS in mid-out, which if you don't know that, it's mid-out sound. But they basically didn't record sound on set at all. All of the hiss and hums, all of the room tone and dialogue, it's all added in post, which I think is really impressive.
What?
Because I think
oh my god, that sounds like such a headache.
Yeah, well, what that does, this is why I think that this movie is almost downright inspiring to me as a sound designer. What they do here is genius, because this movie is all about inference, right? You know how they say, like, you know, you read any fucking book about filmmaking, you go to film school, you'll probably hear a million fucking times that, you know, sound is half the picture. It's 50% of the picture. I believe that. But there is also more. I think sound is more to the film than what you kind of perceive. What sound does to the picture, you know, the image can evoke something, but the sound puts it into reality. And what this film does fucking masterfully is it sets up all these little inferences. It shows you all these shots of darkness, of random rooms in the house, of hallways. It suggests something. Those suggestions probably lean more towards, you know, the unknowing sense of the film, because, you know, the film, you know, is not showing you a whole lot. When you feel overcome with dread and the film is suggesting all of these dark happenings, the sound gives a soundtrack to all of those dark inferences, all those dark suggestions that might be running through your head, providing it, you know, all this hum and hiss, and you might be thinking like hum and hiss are two completely different things. You have the high end hiss, you have the low end like hums, and that creates room tone. Now, naturally, room tone is barely ever called attention to in film because it's just kind of supposed to set you in the space. It's kind of a bed for, you know, dialogue to happen between characters. But a technique that's used by David Lynch, and I also use this myself, is the room tone is heightened and it invades the space. Like, I know that in Eraserhead, it's supposed to invoke an anxious, intimidating feeling. And I think Kyle Edward Ball does a similar thing here. And I think he does it to a more extreme sense. He's using it to set all of those suggestions to life, basically. It becomes a part of the film when it's given this sound design. I think it's really incredible. You'll also hear all the time, show, don't tell. You'll hear show, don't tell a million fucking times. What I think is equally as important is don't show, suggest, which this film is all about. And I think it really speaks to the way that this, you know, film presents its story. You know, there's a clear story here. It's suggested, you know, bringing more of your own interpretations and imagination. You know, if you could do that, you know, without revealing too much or without, you know, leaving you completely in chaos, then I think you've done a great job. And I've never felt once in this film that this movie was too chaotically ambiguous. I didn't feel that way at all.
No, chaotically ambiguous. No, I think it all like it's the perfect amount of I don't know what to say, like style versus substance. Like it doesn't really need those things because it doesn't operate.
Well, I think
it doesn't operate off of them. Like,
well, the aesthetic is the storytelling to me. You know,
yeah,
I think that goes for a lot of films
they're interwoven like really well. Like they're very.
You'll hear style over substance also in a lot of critical spaces, and I think that's also a misleading. I think that's also a misleading statement.
That's like people who don't know, don't have like a better thing to say.
yeah. But yeah, well, let's get more into this. It was only covered like one plot point so far. Is the kid falls. You don't really know the severity of his injury, but the father is on the phone. He's talking upstairs to someone. You don't know who. And he says something like, he's okay. He didn't even need stitches. So the father, seemingly took him somewhere and brought him back. After this happens this is when all of the windows and doors start to disappear, and you get that effect, that boom. And they don't know what's going on. The kids are wandering around the house, and they notice that their father is missing. What they do is they kind of set up the TV, this one TV. You'll see a lot of this like living room space, basically. They set up this TV, and they start just watching random, not really random, because I think every film shown is specific to what's kind of going on, but they start watching these old Fleischer, I think is the name of these old Fleischer cartoons. They're old. I'm meaning like 1920s, 1930s old cartoons, which are in themselves, in any context, are terrifying.
Just normally, yeah.
Normally, you throw one of these on, and it's terrifying. So they start watching these cartoons just to find some semblance of comfort. And I think what the movie communicates exceptionally well with these scenes in the living room with the TV is this overwhelming sense that the space that you naturally think is the safest place is actually the one that's being the most corrupted, and that everything around you, the surrounding darkness that encapsulates this space, is creeping in more and more and more. And you're never really safe there, even if it's the place that you find the most familiar. Have you ever kind of been in that? It's funny to ask, but like, have you ever been in that situation where like
has this ever happened to you?
Has this ever happened to you? Have Skinamarink ever happened to you? Has it ever happened to you? Like you're in this space that you find comfort in, but has been corrupted by something?
Like in a figurative sense? Yeah, I mean, like I've had times where I've like disassociated, and that's definitely kind of like what this feels like. Yeah, no, definitely. I've had like these creepy moments. Usually it's somewhere outside of my own home that I'm unfamiliar with. Like you're in, I don't know, just like a school hallway or like a hospital hall. Like I've did these moments where you're in these like different facilities and you're there too long. You stayed at the office at work too long. And,
those
unfamiliar spaces are like just horrifying.
Well, I'm talking like the familiar spaces I think is what the movie's trying to communicate. The familiar spaces can also be horrifying when they're warped in this sort of way.
I think that happened to me more often when I was younger.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's so easy for that to happen when you're younger because you're so used to like the presence of an adult being around. And so those times where you're like left home alone or something on a school day or whatever it is, and you're the only one in the house, there's an immediate like alien quality to it.
Yeah.
Whereas now I think as adults, we tend to have more security. We tend to know if something goes wrong, we could probably handle ourselves a little bit better. And as a kid, in the back of your mind, there's always is that thing of like, I'm supposed to be protected at all times.
Yeah. I think this movie really touches on that too, because there's no, it's like, what if, there was the kids were alone with no adults. How would they perceive their surroundings without an adult, supervising them, without an adult watching them? And I feel like that confusion is visualized in Skinamarink.
Yeah, that is the style of the movie. It's
Totally.
like looking through, not literally looking through the eye holes of a confused child, but like taking the essence of that and visualizing it.
Yeah. Getting further into story here, I want to touch on a little bit. I think what watching this movie in the theater really accentuated was that each new frame has this sort of warped darkness. I think that that noise filter that's been put over now, it was shot on like new equipment, I think, but all of the look of this film was done in post-production. So that noise that you keep seeing and when it's completely pitch black is added afterward. And I think it's really effective when you're just looking at the darkness.
I was going to say, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the darkness, it looks like, is always moving, which really adds to the
There's
overall
specific
feel.
shots where it's like, this is 100% intentionally, there's supposed to be a guy there. Like, there's a few shots where you look, and the way that the noise moves, it's like just the right amount of movement to not show you anything, but enough for you to know there's something standing like right there.
Absolutely.
But I can't tell for certain.
I was looking for it for so.
That's a really cool.
Absolutely, yeah. I was looking for that for so long. I was like, oh my God, there's someone here, there's someone here. And that's what's playing in your head the entire time when you're looking at these shots. And it's kind of reminiscent of what you just see in normal darkness. I mean, if you've ever been wandering around a dark house and you see things out of the corner of your eye, that's kind of what this film is invoking.
Yeah, no, it is like I saw my my jacket hanging on the doorknob in the middle of the night, and I thought it was a dude.
Yeah, I mean, we've all been there. So what happens next is there is a voice that calls out to the children while they're watching TV. It speaks to Kaylee first, and the voice tells Kaylee to come upstairs. And this sequence right here, Zach, is where I really start to feel this film take a hold of me. Kaylee goes upstairs. She goes into her parents' room, and her father, who they found, I guess, is sitting on the bed. The image itself, kind of scary. Like, imagine you're entering a completely dark room, and your father you're staring at the back of your father's head. He's looking away, and he's just sitting at the edge of the bed. What does that invoke? Like, what feeling does that invoke? Really started to feel this film take a hold of me in this sequence here. What happens is the father tells Kaylee to look under the bed. And of course, you're like, as soon as you hear that, you're waiting for the moment. Like, oh my God, what's going to jump out at me? What's going to happen? And the answer is nothing. So she looks under the bed and nothing really happens, but all the anticipation is just washing over you. And she looks back up. She's like, there's nothing there. And the voice of her father says to look again. look again. And she does it again. And I'm like, oh my God, this needs to end, because I'm already feeling like
someone turn off the film.
Someone turn off the film immediately, because this is too much. And as soon as she looks under the bed again, as soon as she looks back up, her mother is sitting at the other end of the bed. And the father, I think, is gone. The mother's sitting at the other end of the bed. Again, you can only see the back of her head. She's facing away from Kaylee. Once the mother starts to come into the picture, I think I have finally started to understand a little bit more what this movie was getting at. Because, as I said, like in the synopsis of the film, it says that they're trying to find their father who's missing. Nothing is mentioned about the mother. Only little bits. You only get little bits of information about the mother through the kids. I think there's a part in the movie a little bit earlier where they say like, "Why is mom crying?" And you hear that, and you're like, "Wait, where's the mother? Yeah, where is the mother in all this?" And you see the mother sitting at the other end of the bed, and she says something like, "We love you very much," and all this vague shit. It kind of sounds vaguely reminiscent of like a mother before she either A, tells you that they're getting a divorce, or that she's about to like kill the cats or something. But what happens is she gets up and goes into the closet, I believe, and all you hear, it lingers on this shot for a long time, as it does with every fucking shot in this entire movie. Yeah, the shot lingers for a number of seconds. And what you hear is this bone crack. And when I first saw this, I was like, what the fuck is happening? You hear bones cracking. And one of my first thoughts for some reason was I was like, oh, she just killed the father. But after watching the film again, I don't think that's what happened. What happens is you hear a bone cracking, like something like a neck snap or something, and a hand jumps out of the doorway. And that's one of the first proper jump scares. There is one actually earlier on. There is another jump scare, but it's not. I won't say it's like a cheap one, but it's the one where the doll is floating on the ceiling, and then Kevin comes in and is like, "Hey, we need to look at the toilet." And she kind of gets scared of that. That's a little bit of a jump scare, but this is a totally earned jump scare in my opinion, with this little semblance of a hand coming out of the doorway. We can talk about what all this means in a bit when we're done like summarizing the plot. She is basically trapped there. I don't remember if she goes back downstairs, but basically Kevin is still downstairs and starts looking for Kaylee. And the voice, the mysterious voice, tells Kevin to go down to the basement. It's funny because like all these things that we find naturally scary, like, hey, look under the bed. Hey, go to the basement. Those are all naturally scary places. And especially when you're a kid, like what are the scariest places? When you look under the bed, when you go into the scary basement. And it's what this thing is telling them to do. And what happens is Kevin finds Kaylee, and what ends up happening is you see one of, in my opinion, the most effective jump scares I've ever seen. And it sounds weird. Like I've just talked about 2 jump scares in a row. And it's like, oh, is this movie just full of jump scares? It's like, no. But like time passes between these jump scares, but they happen not that long after each other. This movie's not full of jump scares. I would say there's 3 insanely good jump scares in this movie. And this is, I think, the best one. Kevin finds Kaylee and she has no face. And you hear this squeal. And I remember being in the theater. It was maybe the first time I audibly gasped and jumped in my seat while watching, like when a jump scare happens. This was terrifying. What did you think about the way that this film used jump scares?
There's only a few, and I thought that was like one of the more effective ones that definitely got me. I think it was tempered by the fact that I didn't really know who I was looking at. So I think I didn't realize on my first watch in that moment that was Kaylee until whatever the entity is later says that explains that it took her face, her mouth.
Yeah, it had to take
eyes,
her face away. Yeah, it took her mouth and her eyes.
And then I retroactively understood, oh, that was Kaylee earlier. I thought it was the mom or something again.
Oh, yeah.
So I think if it had hit me like that, it would have been like even more effective. But I thought that was pretty spooky. There's like one other like we haven't mentioned because it happens later, but it barely matters. There's one other jump scare that's kind of goofy. when,
yeah,
that like got me. But I was like, oh
God
yeah,
damn it, like you were angry that it got you.
But yeah, or I was like, oh my god, really? I can't believe that was. I didn't expect it to be a jump scare.
Yeah, we'll get to that
in a movie like this.
Yeah,
but it was
we'll get to that in just a bit. So this jump scare happens, and this is really where the film starts to delve into fucking madness. Kevin comes back upstairs, and something we haven't mentioned before, but all of the toys that they're playing with, all the Legos, some of even the furniture is being stuck to the wall. Like very early on, actually, there's a chair on the ceiling, inexplicably, and you don't really know why. Throughout the film, the entity, whatever you want to call it, is just completely messing with them, and is taking away the toys very slowly and basically nailing them to the wall. Like especially the TV, like the back wall of the TV has just all this clutter of children's toys nailed to it. And it gets to the point where there is just so much crap on the ceiling that it just looks like trash. It's kind of I find it kind of a funny image, but definitely in a spooky way. One of the most upsetting things in this film happens next, and it's when the entity tells Kevin to put a knife in his eye, and he does it. And you even see like the drawer, I think, not fly openly, but it just opens. Kevin grabs the knife, and you just hear his screams basically, and it's really, really, it's a way to do it's a way to do kid violence in an interesting. It's a way to do like violence against a kid in an interesting way, or tasteful. I guess 'cause it's not showing anything, but what it's doing is enough, basically.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people are going to need a lot. Like a child screams, is like one of the worst things you could possibly hear.
Yeah. Especially when that's actually 4 years old.
And yeah, it's suggestive. Like, yeah, like there's at least like 3 or so instances, if you're including the face missing, as like what you could call violence against children in the movie, and like none of it is like on camera or anything like that. Like it's all, and some of it you could almost like wonder if it's really happening the way that it's shown to you. Yeah, that part was like, that was definitely one of the freakier parts of the movie.
And there is a surprising amount of gore in this film as well. I didn't really expect any blood to be shown in this film, but you see like little semblances of blood on the. There are some shots where you see blood on the drawer, and even that just that kind of punches you a bit. There is another scene with blood in a bit, which I have a lot of thoughts on. Before that, after Kevin seemingly like stabs himself in the eye, what happens after that is the house basically completely turns upside down, and this is really supposed to signify the entity like really taking over and warping the space. You see the house upside down. I think you get an establishing shot of the house that's like this little dollhouse in this room of complete nothingness, which is very thought provoking. I think what I read in an interview that said that they filmed specific rooms in the house, but the garage most notably was like their production design room. So I think shots like this happened. There are shots that were designed in the garage. Funnily enough, it gives me vibes of, I don't know if you've ever read the book House of Leaves. That's kind of what this something like this is invoking. Basically, House of Leaves is about, well, it's about a lot of things, but it's basically, to describe it simply, it's a book within a book, and the book that this person finds is a fake book about a hallway that is impossible. And that's something that kind of I get a sense of when watching a scene. That's when it poured over me, like, oh, this is really a lot. This is a lot like the Navidson record in House of Leaves. When you see the upside down hallway and the establishing shot of the house in seemingly nothingness. Did those images make you, like remind you of anything, specific?
No, not really. No, honestly, I didn't invoke any. That was not like there's a lot of images in the movie that do kind of recall personal experiences that I've had, but that was not. I don't think that was a moment that I like had a strong reaction to. But yeah,
basically after that, that's when there's this 911 call, and this 911 call is pretty devastating. Basically, Kevin picks up the phone, and this is the first time that there's any real semblance of an outside world. He dials the phone. He dials 911, and someone answers, and it's the first time you're hearing another voice that isn't, the children's or this entity. I think this phone call scene is pretty devastating, but nothing comes of it. He even says like, well, there are no doors here. I think. I
don't know how to get out.
I don't know how to get out. Like, there's no doors here. I think that's when oh my God. That is when the mother comes back into the picture, and you see the back of her head, and she is now, I think that this is when like the TV turns off, and she's like standing or kneeling down in front of it. When this happens, I felt like just seeing the back of the mother's head was so much. It was it was terrifying just seeing a human person appear in the frame again in the picture, especially when it's the back of someone's head, someone with like long hair. It's very striking to see after just so many shots of just hallways and corners of rooms and stuff. It's really quite jarring. And that's kind of where you get the sense like, oh, the mother is a pretty big player in all this, huh? This is when this fucking phone appears. Goddamn, this fucking phone. If you've ever seen the movie, I don't know if anyone's seen this phone toy before. It's kind of recognizable. If you've ever seen Toy Story 3, Woody interacts with this phone. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it's like an iconic, like 90s, maybe even older. It's probably
like 80, maybe like an 80s toy.
It's probably like I would imagine it's like actually really old. It's like some kind of like Fisher Price looking ass phone with like a face on it. Like just one of those fake oh my God, I forget what they even call them. I had one in my house. The wind up. Oh, no, I'm showing my age. Like the dial-up phones or whatever they're called. What are those things called?
Dial-up phones. I don't even think my house ever had
the ones where you had to put your finger in and like spin.
A rotary phone?
Rotary phone. That's what it is. Rotary phone. Yeah, we had a rotary phone in our house for a hot minute. Yeah, it's a toy rotary phone with like a face on it. And I mean, specifically, you see the way the shot works is you see darkness, and you see these like three little like lips in the dark. You barely even like register them. I was like, am I seeing like eyes or something?
Oh, you
and
are
then
seeing
a light
the eyes.
comes on, and you realize you're looking at the eyes of the toy, and you're like, okay. And so you're just staring at this for like a full 10 seconds, just like right at this phone. At eyes.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the eyes just invert and a loud screech noise happens. And I was like...
Yeah, and it smiles at you.
And
yeah.
I felt so fucking stupid. Yeah.
I was terrified by this because...
That one was just in there as a joke.
Yeah. Well, I was terrified by this because at this point, I'm in full shelter mode, like seek shelter mode. I'm in like... I'm at my worst, basically. Half my fucking hand is above my eyes. It's not pretty. So when this jump scare happens, I was like, God damn it, fuck. Yeah. really scared the bejesus out of me. And I think that these eyes that happen, I think that we'll get to like what everything means in a sec. But these eyes that you see, I think, are actually what the entity is. And that when the flashlight turns on again, it takes the form of this object, of this phone, because the phone is not established anywhere else but toward the end of this film. So I think it's using the phone as a way to fuck with Kevin. But yeah, so after that, the movie does something really fucking vile. I think what happens is that it establishes this time that it loops basically these buckets of blood that are being shed across the floor ceiling, the floor that is now the ceiling. And all you're hearing is a child, like the entity has now gotten the kid, and you just hear a child screaming as a bucket of blood just gets shed across the ceiling floor. It rewinds, and then it happens again, and it happens again, and it happens again, and you're just forced to look at this for way longer than seems way longer than seems nice. You know, it really, this scene I think stuck with me the most out of anything else depicted here. What did you think?
Oh, and then at the end he calls out for the mom right at the end of the moment too, for just
he does
fucked up.
Yeah. Oh fuck, dude. Yeah, it's so sad. And what could actually be happening is that it could, and we'll get to what everything means obviously, but maybe you could be seeing the mother doing whatever she's doing, and he's calling out for her. Or it could just be like, mommy, I'm being fucking savagely mutilated by a fucking entity.
Eviscerated.
It's really sad. I forgot to mention during when the house is flipped upside down, the movie cuts to a card that says 572 days later, which takes you really off guard. You're like, oh my God. Like just the amount of time that has seemingly passed by just completely escapes you. And then this title card comes up to throw everything off, because you think that this is all just one fucked up night, and it's not. Basically, the movie ends with this shot of a weird doorway. It kind of is like it looks like a painting of a doorway, honestly. But inside of this doorway is this face. It is a completely pitch black frame with some semblance of a face in sort of like the middle left. I think there's definitely something there. I think it's probably the mother as the entity. And basically the kid calls out and asks, "What is your name?" And he asks it a few times. He says, "What is your name? What is your name?" And the movie goes, the end. That's it. You're free. That's it. Thank you for watching. What did you think about all the ending of the film here?
Stuff. It kind of like opens it up at the end there, because I mean it's funny because we just said that the kid asked, what is your name, after we just described a scene in which we think that the kid might have been horribly mutilated. So it's like, it's not very clear time-wise if at this point we are in like a linear,
absolutely not.
Like, are we in a different dimension now? Like, what's going on? Like, why is the kid alive? Did the kid actually die? Like, what was that? The kid crying out in pain? It seemed like it. I mean, they're definitely in like some sort of void, because we're seeing endless hallways with the toys in it, and
let's get to the like your interpretations of the story here. Like, what do you think is going on here?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I have a very simple interpretation, which is just that these kids are in a house, which at the beginning of the movie is a normal house. And then at some point, there's some higher power which I think we can say is malevolent, takes over the house, but not in like a spooky ghost kind of way where it just kind of is floating around invisibly.
Yeah,
It seems to actually, ooh, watch out for me. Like, it seems to like literally transport the house, slowly corrupt the house and takes it to another plane of existence, basically. Where
that
the
would
kids are
explain
stuck for
that
like
would,
572 days.
That would explain the sort of establishing shot that I was saying of the house that makes it look like a dollhouse in this like endless void, basically.
Yeah, the house is like in an endless void. You see that at the end, right?
Yeah, toward the end.
And to me, it just seems like once you get into that really abstract imagery territory towards the end, where we're seeing the house distorted in this weird way, I think they're just in a completely different realm of like existence. Like, I think the mom was dead before the story even started. Because they say when the father disappears early on in the movie, I think it's
they say I don't want to talk about
Kevin. Mom. Well, they specifically say Kevin asks Kaylee where she thinks their dad went. Kevin says maybe he went with mom. And I think you can take that literally to mean out to the grocery store. Or I think it means that
to hell.
To hell. Like their mom is dead, but via normal means or whatever. Or we don't know. But I think that their mom is dead. They understand that she's dead. And they were living in that house with their dad. And then their dad is taken or disappears for whatever reason. Obviously due to this malevolent entity. And the kid is suggesting maybe he went to, heaven or the afterlife or whatever. I think that's what he's saying. Because the way that they shoot the mom and the way that the kids react to the mom kind of feels like the mom isn't supposed to be there. Like, yeah. Like we only hear the father, or we only kind of understand the father to be like a literal person who's supposed to actually be there and isn't.
Yeah, I mean, he's the person that they're trying to look for.
Yeah, and why aren't they looking for their mom?
Yeah, but it's like, oh, don't mention. Yeah, but Kevin's like, oh, don't mention mom. I think there's also a scene where Kevin says, "Why is mom crying?" Do you remember that?
Oh, does he say that?
But no, I think you're right. Like throughout the entire film, they seem very like off guard that their mother is in the picture, and I felt that way throughout the basically the entirety of the film. Like the mother feels like she's not supposed to be there.
Yeah, the mom, they don't really pull that same stuff with the dad that they pull with the mom. Whenever you see the mom, it's like it's supposed to be creepy that she's there, at all. And my assumption, especially when you get to that scene where she's sitting on the bed, is that that's like her ghost or something. Like that's her spirit, or it's making
well, it makes sense. Like she doesn't
making
appear
an imitation.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes sense because she basically appears out of nowhere after Kaylee looks under the bed.
And we never really see it have that ability to do that with anybody else or anything else. It's not really ever able to like control people in this literal way. Like it takes the daughter's face away, but it can't hypnotize her or anything like that. All of that kind of makes me think like the mom was already kind of dead to begin with and was brought here.
Yeah, I never thought of that actually. Like the mother being dead before the movie takes place.
I mean, maybe it doesn't help that the description of the movie also says 2 children wake up in the middle of the night to find their father is missing.
Yeah.
And doesn't say anything about a mom.
That's what always maybe that also me, yeah.
Maybe that also kind of like set my expectations.
Yeah, I expected there not to be a mother, and then a mother shows up and it's like, "Oh, what's she doing?"
Yeah. So I think there's some weird dimension hopping shit happening. That is why simultaneously you can see a scene where the kid is supposedly in physical danger and is being killed and a lot of blood is coming from somewhere. And then in literally like 2 minutes after that, the kid is talking.
Well, what do you think about the looping blood? Like he's getting killed over and over again, I think.
Yeah, that was kind of my interpretation was like, well, it doesn't just loop. It like phases in and out of existence. It's weird. It's almost like you're screaming and you see blood, and then it it does a little hiccup or a skip, and you see that same shot. The fact that it skips in between this shot where there is blood and then there isn't blood in Screaming. What I took away from that while I was watching it, that was that sort of dimension hopping stuff. Was that that is simultaneously happening and not happening. Just depends on the reality.
Yeah,
because clearly we're past the realm of reality.
Exactly. Like, is there even a reality in this film being depicted?
I think at the beginning there is, and I think it's slowly, like churning away. I think it's slowly being kind of like digested almost. I think like the phone call to the outside is real, that he makes when he makes the 911 call. I don't think by the time you get to the end where he's going up the stairs, they're in Kansas anymore.
I mean, maybe they're not. Well, I think they're in Canada, actually.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my mistake. Yeah.
We're not in Canada anymore.
We're not in Campbell anymore. I'm sick.
Yeah, I think there's so much. I think everything. The mother is such a major variable in this film, and it's kind of at the center of deciphering what the film is actually about, or what's actually like happening in this story. Like, is the mother a vessel for the entity, and the entity starts to take hold once because remember, there's a scene where the mother goes into the closet and the neck snaps. There's like a neck snap, a bone crunching, and that sound effect is accentuated. It's specific. It's supposed to represent a major change in the story. There's many interpretations of what I think is happening here. I don't think it's any one thing in particular.
No.
I'll shed a light onto some theories some people have. Number one, this could be a visual representation of a coma. Because if you remember at the beginning of the film,
because at the beginning
of the film, Kevin falls down the stairs, and the film could be his coma.
Okay.
Now, I will say, and out of every interpretation of the film that I have, nothing about the actual inciting incident of him falling down the stairs really plays a major factor. I don't really know what that inciting thing is supposed to really mean. I think it can mean a whole ton of things. I always go back to like, okay, but him falling down the stairs, what does that have to do with this thing, the mother, the entity? What does that have to do with him falling down the stairs in the beginning? I'm not sure.
My only interpretation is that is like the beginning of the influence, right?
Yeah,
because it like speaks to people. It does speak to them, and
it seems like before
obviously makes him.
Yeah, and it seems like before the movie really starts, because you get that shot of Kevin in the hallway looking up at the doorway, and it's like, and he's supposed to be sleepwalking, but is the entity? You kind of question like, okay, is the entity maybe speaking to him in this moment? We don't know. The coma thing though makes a lot of sense, especially toward the end, because there are shots, I think some of the shots that really absolutely terrify me after the fact are certain photographs in the house that seemingly have no face or have a warped face to them. Those pictures might be representing Kevin slowly losing his memory, and the last shot of the mother in the darkness and him asking what's your name is him forgetting his mother, or he's speaking about himself. What is your name? I can't remember my name. It could be about the mother, it could be about himself. I think that makes sense.
That's
in
cool.
A way,
that's a cool interpretation.
Yeah, in a way it's kind of like it kind of reminds me of that album Everywhere at the End of Time, that's supposed to represent dementia and the loss of memory. That album by The Caretaker. Have you ever listened to that or know anything about that?
No.
In fact, a lot of things in this film kind of remind me of like visual representation of an album like this. If you haven't checked it out, it's this 6-hour album about it basically uses a sample and then has the sample deteriorate over 6 hours until it becomes this warbling space of emptiness, and you hear that sonically, and it's devastating, and it's supposed to represent dementia. Made by The Caretaker. I highly recommend you listen to it, even though it is a very tough experience to get through. And I would kind of say the same thing about Skinamarink. I feel like those two works of art are related in some way. And I think if you're going to go with the interpretation that this is about a coma, the loss of memory, I think it works like that.
From a visual perspective and the sound perspective, that fits. Like it doesn't have to be literal, but that makes sense stylistically, like with what the movie is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like a visual version of losing your mind, kind of. Or having it slip away. Losing your mind sounds like chaotic. This is like gently having your consciousness slowly fade away from you.
Like pieces of what you think are familiar going missing.
Yeah.
So that's one interpretation that I've seen. Another one is one about child abuse and trauma, which also makes a lot of sense. And I feel like a lot of these could be maybe put together to make one big interpretation of what the film is about. But one that I can kind of see is neglect, and the fact that you see a lot of the two adult characters, the mother and the father, are always facing away from the children. I feel like is supposed to represent some sort of neglect. And I think what's happening, according to what some have theorized, that's going on in the film, is that the parents are just not really in the picture of, or not really paying attention much to the children, and this is what's happening when there are no parents around, because they've just been mistreating, abusing, and neglecting their kids. And it's definitely speaks true when you get to something like the knife scene, because you hear stories about like, oh yeah, a little kid, like the parent wasn't paying attention and the kid got their hands on a knife and hurt themselves.
That I guess kind of makes sense to me too. I don't know if that one gels as much as the coma thing. Normally I think like the coma stuff in speculating about like characters being like, oh, it was all a dream. It's like kind of stupid, but
yeah,
because it basically just says, oh, the story doesn't matter. But for Skinamarink, like the idea of it being a coma is really strong because the entire movie is designed in a way for that to like make sense, like that like fits with the experience. I don't know if the second thing matches the experience of watching it as much as that first thing about the coma.
I think it might be something more deeply subtextual than it is textual.
Well, I just think the coma thing is beautifully both textual and subtextual.
Yeah, totally.
Whereas the second one's a little bit more like putting the pieces together using your film school, film analysis stuff.
That's more
I guess I can kind of see that, but
it's more like over-analyzing brain going on.
Yeah, maybe it's like.
And also, like, if you're
snapping represents her suicide when she, whatever.
Oh, I never thought about that. Holy shit!
Passed it on to the kid because then he stabs himself in the eye with a knife.
Goddamn, fuck. That's fucking with me right now. I never thought about that. I think when you, that's another thing. Like, I feel like a lot of movies are about trauma nowadays. A lot of horror is about trauma.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it's an overused theme.
Elevated horror.
I'm not going to say it's like an overused theme because, horror has been dealing with trauma for fucking ages and ages and ages.
Also, most people are dealing with trauma.
Most people fucking deal with, most people deal with trauma.
Popular.
It's reflected in our art pretty regularly, I would say.
For some reason.
So, it's not too far off the beaten path to think that Skinamarink is also about some sort of childhood trauma. especially since, the background that we know about this film, that it was shot in Kyle Edward Ball's childhood home. Maybe he has some sort of connection there. I'm not saying that he went through some sort of trauma. I don't know about his personal life, but I think, from the evidence of the film, maybe he's touching on that. I am not sure, especially if you watch his short films as well, like Heck, and Bite-Sized Nightmares. And Bite-Sized Nightmares. You can definitely get a sense of that as well. I like all these theories, and the thing about these interpretations is they're never wrong, mostly never wrong. Because I think there is no definitive way to read this film. Basically, I don't think there's a definitive way to read any film. Making every kind of interpretation you have about this film is in some way right, I believe. Because it's all about invoking a feeling, all about invoking fear and its connection to nostalgia, I believe, which kind of leads more into my main takeaway from Skinamarink thematically. I really think that this movie is sort of a response to idolization of our childhood, and taking, because so many things are, we constantly glorify things about our childhood. And I think this movie is reflecting on that and giving it this coating of overwhelming horror. And it's basically that's saying to me, like, hey, like, we shouldn't, stuff from our childhood can be fucked up and, not supposed to be dwelled upon. And I think, Kyle Edward Ball is using this like fear of the unknown to exemplify that. And, it's using, things like these like cartoons and toys, and just the idea of being, in your home as a child, and using all of those things as weapons.
I mean, I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, I think that's what the most effective horror is like taking stuff that is very intimate and specific and using it as, I guess, a weapon is one way to do it. And like,
yeah.
And I know a lot of people get catharsis out of that too. Like,
there's definitely catharsis. Yeah.
Like confronting those things and just like engaging with those feelings. Cause, otherwise you'd have to have actual bad things happen to you in order to feel those things. But yeah, I think that is like I said to I forget who I was talking to, but I think it was probably my partner. I realized that the most effective horror moments and things were like not these like kind of generally scary things, but like things that the closer it was to a dream, the more effective it was to me. The more surreal and odd and specific the thing is, it doesn't have to be literally like wacky Fantasyland Goofy Town. But the more the situation is kind of like you had too much pizza last night and you're having just a bad one.
We're not having a good time. Shouldn't have eaten 8 slices of pizza.
Yeah.
Now, Skinamarink,
right before you go to bed, you quickly wolf down like 10 slices of Hawaiian.
Yeah.
Every night.
I ate too much barbecue chicken pizza. Now Skinamarink is after me.
No, the Skinamarink is. That is like the crazy. Whereas for some other people, they're going to horror movies kind of expecting, I don't know, like the typical ghosts and more blunt, basic, visceral things. Like I'm a person who doesn't actually think The Shining is that scary, for example.
What?
I don't know if that's like
I've heard that before.
A controversial opinion.
No,
I don't think it's fucking scary.
It's a good movie, but well, it's the thing. Like,
it's
not
a solid movie.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that's a broader point, though. Like, not all horror movies have to be like holy shit terrifying. Like, not all horror movies have to scare you. Horror is more of, I think, a style, an aesthetic.
Right.
There's monster movies, paranormal films, slasher films.
But just the way that this one is rooted in, like, it's not like, what if I made a ghost movie? It's like, what if I made a movie that made you feel like how I felt
exactly
when I was a kid?
Yes.
And this thing happened. Like,
what if after this film you were reduced to a child, which is exactly how I felt during this after this film ended. You just feel like you're living in this primordial ooze, you know, like you are in this. You're in the pool of creation after watching Skinamarink. I don't know if that makes any lick of sense.
Like your rib was just taken to make the first woman after you watched Skinamarink.
If that makes any sense. I was trying to verbalize like the complete just pool of dread that overwhelmed me when this film ended.
I mean, there's something about it that I think will come up again, and that is when we talk about other things, which is that this marks like a different direction for found footage horror and like
for analog horror,
found footage in general. Yeah.
Well, I think after this, like
so
analog,
much of it has been kind of stuck in the same bullshit, and they don't know why they're doing it.
Well, I think horror. Reason? Well, I think horror has been in a good place for a while, actually.
Horror. I'm speaking specifically about found footage.
Yeah,
just like found footage is.
The thing
like,
is, I don't know if you can relate.
This? Oh, because Cloverfield did it.
Well, no. I don't know if you can really relate this movie to even like found footage conventions. This movie isn't found footage; it's more analog horror. But you know, the two are very connected in many ways.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
There's a version of this movie where Hollywood would have greenlit it if it was a movie where a guy walked around with a camera. Like, it begs to be a movie like that.
Yeah.
And the fact that they didn't go that direction, that he was like, if you ask somebody, is it a found footage movie? You can't say, no, it's a normal camera. It has normal camera shots. It's like, it definitely doesn't. It definitely looks like a
camera movie.
Is it a traditionally shot movie? No,
absolutely not.
What does it look like? Well, it kind of looks like somebody left a VHS camera lying on the ground.
Yeah.
From like the 90s. Oh, so it's found footage. No, it's not. Because nobody, it's not a real camera.
Man, just watch it. I'll give you my Shudder account. Just watch it.
Yeah, you just gotta experience it. But that's what's cool is it's not restricted to a specific label. It's just like, it's just its own style. It's its own thing.
It's its own thing. Exactly. It's totally its own thing, and you got to respect the craft going on. I really believe that. Finishing thoughts on Skinamarink, I just thought that this was a spectacular experience for me, and one that you really just don't get very often. Like, I see great films throughout the year. Every year is a good year for movies, I would say. You just got to know where to look. And in this case, when we're looking back at 2023, you'll be like, oh, you know, this thing really blew up out of nowhere, and it was special.
Yeah.
Just this past year in 2022, I feel like I saw one of the best movies I've ever seen in my whole entire fucking life. And this year, I'm getting already 2 months into 2023, and it's like, you got Skinamarink, you got The Outwaters, you are seeing.
You got Megan.
You got fucking Megan. All these different flavors of horror are coming together, building themselves up to establish the next generation of horror filmmaking. And I think it's doing the genre a great service. Skinamarink, I gave this movie fucking 5 stars on Letterboxd, by the way.
I give it 5 stars too.
Dude, like, I haven't felt this passionate about a horror film in a very long time, and I see a lot of great horror films. I thought a movie like Barbarian last year was the most excited I felt about a horror movie
Barbarian was so fun.
In a very long time. Barbarian was amazing. And then the year before that is when Malignant came out, and I fucking loved Malignant. I thought, like, oh man.
Malignant that is a movie that, I guess if you want to know about me, that's a movie that I call a masterpiece.
Yeah. And if you want to know about me, I call fucking Skinamarink a masterpiece. I just believe, like, this is, you know, we're really giving these DIY filmmakers a voice and a space in the current horror in horror cinema, and I'm really happy about it, and I hope they keep going.
It's dope. There's a lot of flavors of horror now.
What what are your final? Do you have any final thoughts about Skinamarink?
I'm glad it exists. It's it's fucking badass that you can make something like this for $15,000, and people can respond to it and talk about it, and in a non-vicious way, just disagree. And some people love it, some people hate it, some people just don't get it. Like, but it's at least like interesting and doing something and succeeding at doing that thing that it's trying to do.
Absolutely.
That's like art.
That's fucking art, baby.
That's fucking art, baby.
That's fucking art, baby. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed our big Skinamarink episode. We've got a lot planned for this show. Next week, I'm thinking we do the Atwater, Zach.
I'm so excited to watch the Outwaters.
Oh, man. I've watched the Outwaters already, and I'm excited for you to watch the Outwaters. Might sound something like this review. I'm not going to just to tease a little, just to tease a little bit about it. But yeah, very excited to talk about that next week. And yeah, thank you for listening. If you like this show, give us a little bit of feedback on what we can improve. What we should keep doing, what we should focus on more. And I really appreciate that. Give us, a good review, good, that 5 stars on an Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever you want to do. Follow me on Twitter at Shaudio, at Schiffer Audio, I think, but the Twitter handle is Shaudio. And yeah, you can listen to my other podcast. I think I mentioned this review that I'm a sound designer. I actually have a brand new show called Blackwood, a Gothheim